We have begun.
Yes, we have begun. And yet we have not yet begun to fight.
Nope. Okay.
So let's start fighting.
Say the things.
Say the things.
Mm-hmm.
The things are, this is the second of our new series on apologetics, the existence of God, and world religions type things.
Woo.
Fun stuff, yeah, lots of fun stuff. And hope that if you haven't watched the first one, you go back and watch it. We want to just briefly mention, in that first one, we mentioned a couple of the different arguments for God, as well as getting sidetracked talking about different religions.
Yeah.
Like the Pastafarians.
Way too
and,
long.
Yeah, it wasn't too long. It was 28 minutes. But anyway, so we talked about the teleological argument. Abigail, do you remember what the teleological argument was?
The one that said that the nature is matter and matter is design and design had a designer.
Okay, so it looks at the order of the cosmos, the order of the creation, which we call it. I don't. What do the what do those who believe it wasn't created call it? The happenstance. I don't know. What do you
The
call
poof. There it is.
the existence stuff, you know. But we believe that it has an order to it. The fact that we can predict things like solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, sunrise, sunset, shows that it's working more precisely even than a clock. And then second, we talked about the cosmological argument. Xander, you want to tell a word or two about what that one was?
The cosmological argument, despite being spelled differently than cause, is the argument that means that something had to have caused the things.
Yeah, there was a cause.
Mm-hmm.
There was a
And a
cause for
Mo.
the cosmological. It's logical that Mo had a cause.
God's name is Mo. It's Mo's cause.
Mm-mm. God's name is Andy.
Andy
Because
walks
that
with
song.
me, Andy talks with me.
Andy tells me I am his own.
And his son is a rose. He's a rose.
No.
He's a
And he loves
rose.
miso.
Yes. And he's
Because
a biscuit
he loves
because he
miso.
was low in the gravy.
That's fair.
No, I very confused.
Or he could have
people.
been a chunk of sausage.
Well, you know, one child thought God's name was Howard. Because in the prayer, Jesus said, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name."
Yeah.
So
That wouldn't be Jesus' name though.
no, that's Jesus' father.
Yeah,
That's the-
Jesus' father is
Yeah.
Howard.
So this one's off to a great start.
It is.
But
We're
is
only
it-
3 minutes
so
in.
we
We
were-
can waste more time.
No, thanks.
Woo!
We've covered, again, mentioned the teleological and the cosmological arguments. And if you want to know more about those, watch that first video. So now we want to talk about the ontological argument. And this argument,
Is the fun one.
I don't know if I'd call it fun. It's the one that those that try to disprove God kind of start with sometimes, because they think all of the rest hang on this one. It was actually first clearly formulated by a guy named Saint Anselm, and that was like 1077 or 78, so that was like nearly 1,000 years ago.
Sounds right.
So this argument's been around a long time. And basically, it says that the fact that we have an idea of God, and that we have this idea of this perfect supernatural being that's so far beyond us that we can't fully comprehend, the only way we would have that idea would be if that being actually did exist. Now, some have tried to boil this down to saying, well, if you think of something, then it has to exist. But that is not really what this argument says.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so people say, well, I can imagine the perfect steak or the perfect island or, you know, whatever, and so that thing must exist. Well, no. It's a different concept, really. And it's a little difficult to really nail down.
I think the basic way that I remember it being put was that if you imagine a being who is perfectly good, all powerful, and so on and so on.
Perfect in every
perfect in every
way.
conceivable way.
Yeah.
Then a being like that has to exist because, first of all, because of the all powerfulness of his nature. If you limit him to just being in your imagination or a part of your thoughts, then you're limiting his power, and so he's not all powerful. So, and that was part of it, was since the ontological argument is like, if you picture this all-powerful being, then that being has to exist. Well, yes, he has to exist, because if he doesn't exist, that's a limit on his power, and so he has to exist.
It's kind of a weird one. It's sometimes described as God is the necessary being.
Mm-hmm.
It is necessary for him to exist.
Yeah. And out of all of the arguments for God's existence, this one gets closest to God's actual character. Because in the book of Exodus, when God is talking to Moses from the burning bush, he says, "You go tell the Israelites, I am has sent me to you." Those words in the Hebrew, I am, mean
I am that I am.
the self-existing one. Basically just, he exists because he has to exist, because he can't not exist.
Yeah.
He is the all-powerful being, and for a being to be all-powerful, that being has to exist, always.
And this one is also the most purely philosophical.
Yes.
The others are based on our observations of nature and our observations of cause and effect and things like that. And we're going to look at one more in a little while that I actually like better than any of these three in some ways. But this idea that if there is existence, then this greatest existent being must be for existence to exist. And it gets kind of sounds like gobbledygook sometimes the way it gets worded, but that's kind of the way philosophy works.
Yeah.
Descartes also kind of made this one more famous, and he kind of when Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," so he's saying I exist and I know I exist because I'm capable of thinking. He's kind of playing on this same idea.
Yeah.
This same idea that
It's similar.
that there this being, this God, has to exist because
I think he exists.
but more than that, because
Because of
I
who
I can't
he
think of
would
any
have to be.
greater being. I can't think of and the idea also with a lot of these philosophical ideas, the idea that even if there are multiple universes, and if a all-powerful creative being exists anywhere in any of those,
in just one universe
of the
multiverse,
infinite number of universes, if there's one where he exists, then if he is also omnipresent, which means he's everywhere, and he is all powerful, to be all powerful, he'd have to be able to go
God,
everywhere.
he would have to be both of those things.
And so if he's in one place, he's everywhere.
Which means he's in all the universes, including this one. And because of the way the concept of an infinite universe or multiverse theory works, if that is true, then there is that being in one of those universes, which means there is that being in all of those universes.
Everywhere. And it's interesting, one of the things as atheists try to disprove God. Now, there are a lot of people, I know people who don't believe in God. But when an atheist says, I know there's not a God, he's put himself in a very awkward position. Because basically what he said is, I know everything there is to know, everywhere there is to know it, and in all time. So he knows there is no God. How does he know that? In order to know that, he would have had to have been everywhere. and he would have had to have been everywhere at all times, because how does he know that God's not in the past or in the future when he goes looking?
Mm-hmm.
And he has to be everywhere, because how does he know that while he's looking in Asia, God's not in Canada
Mm-hmm.
or on another planet at that moment?
Basically, in order to prove that God
And he'd have
doesn't
to be-
exist, you would have to be God.
You have to be God, because and also you'd have to be powerful enough and know enough that God couldn't be hiding from you.
Yeah.
So you would have to be more powerful than God. You would have to be everywhere that there is to be, and then you would have to know everything and be able to travel throughout all points in space-time instantaneously.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be God.
Yeah.
And so the only capability to disprove God would be being God himself.
And then you couldn't disprove God.
Because you would have to
You'd
be
have to
God,
be disproving
basically.
yourself. So it's when you start getting into the philosophy side of the existence of God, of a God, and you know, we haven't gotten to the point of narrowing this down to this is the God that is revealed in the Bible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But just the idea that there is a creative, powerful, all-powerful, omnipresent, omniscient being that is in past, present, and future, never born, never dying, that being existing.
And
Yes.
getting into changing from just does God exist to is the God that exists the God of the Bible. Do we want to talk about the fourth argument?
Yeah, that kind of, because all of these, you know, there could be a malevolent, a hateful, spiteful,
Evil.
evil being that
That
was
is-
all powerful
Mm-hmm.
and imaginative and
Mhm.
creative
Mm-hmm.
and also destructive and knows everything and can travel throughout all space-time instantaneously, and so on
And so, as Christians, we have these three arguments: the teleological, the ontological, the cosmological, that we use to prove, hey,
there must be
there
some
must
being
be
out there.
some kind of a God. Well, then how do we know that that
What
is
God?
our God? How do we know that that is our good, gracious, loving Father and not
The devil.
basically,
You know,
as
some in
some
fact,
people would say it?
Some people do try, and we may have to deal with this more specifically in another lesson. Is some people try to say, you know, there's a good God and a bad God, basically,
Mm.
and that they're on evil. You know, that there's this battle between them.
Mhm.
And of course, some people say that the Christian God is the good God, and some people say the Christian God is the bad God.
Mhm.
So we'll have to talk about that sometime, because that gets into a whole another realm.
But the fourth argument
That's
is
what
the
we're talking
argument that shows. Well, the first three talk about how God exists.
And a powerful, creative, intelligent,
Mhm.
and all of those kinds of things.
But the fourth argument goes a bit beyond that. It shows not only that a God exists, but
what
not
kind
only
of God?
Mhm.
What kind?
it shows the character of the God.
So
which does
Abigail, you got
exist.
any idea what argument we could use to argue that the God that exists is a good God, a kind God, a loving God? What might
No.
we use? No.
I had one that I was thinking of earlier.
Well, what were you thinking of?
There's another way that you can prove that God exists, because if you just think that there's an all-powerful, sinless God, perfect God out there, then he has to exist, because if you don't have a moral standard in the world, then you can't know what good and evil is.
Huh, she's found
She's
it.
nailed it. She nailed
What?
it. It's the moral law.
Mhm.
The fact that we as human beings even have the concept of morality.
What
that
is
there
good?
are things that are right and wrong.
Mhm.
Now we may disagree about what those right and wrong things are,
Mhm.
or what those good and evil things are. But the fact that that concept exists, where did that concept of good and evil, right and wrong come from? That didn't come from evolution.
No.
That didn't come from blind chance.
Because, like evolutionists say, survival of the fittest, the strong must survive. That is a heartless, cruel philosophy that, if you follow evolution, would be true.
And that is the philosophy within a lot of the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
When two wolves fight for superiority,
There's no,
pack,
oh, you
but,
scratched me, no.
But and interestingly enough, even as human beings, we don't look and go, well, that's a bad wolf and that's the good wolf. They're
Nope.
fighting.
Nope.
It's natural. That's nature.
Mm-hmm.
But human beings are different.
Mm-hmm.
When we see two people trying to kill each other,
Like, oh, that one's trying to
That
steal
one-
the other one's money. He must be the bad guy.
or that one attacked first and this
Mhm.
guy was not doing anything, so he
Mhm.
must be the bad one.
Mhm.
And we have all of these standards of right and wrong that we start to build up. It's wrong to take something that's somebody else's. It's
Mhm.
wrong to hit somebody. It's wrong to bully somebody. It's wrong to call somebody names. It's wrong to lie. It's wrong. And we start building up all these things. This is right. This is wrong. This is good. This is evil.
And we construct a moral law. And the question is, where did that come from? Because, as we have said,
Monkeys don't have it.
if
Apes
we're
don't have
simply a product of evolution, just like monkeys, wolves, all the animals in the world around us, then we should be basically no different from them.
We should
Sure,
be
more
anim-
highly evolved, but still, that does not justify the existence of the moral law that we have as humans. Even when it becomes tainted and skewed, it is still there.
And every society on earth has a standard for it.
Mhm.
Now, again, they may differ. The cannibalists in South America don't live by the same standard that people who think it's wrong to eat another human being live
Mhm.
by. But they still have that standard.
Mhm.
They don't eat each other. They
Yep.
only eat their enemies.
And some,
they have standards. They have
sticking with the cannibalism example, some cannibalists have laws in their culture that you are only allowed to eat those who you have defeated in war, or you are only allowed to eat those people on certain holidays or special events. And it's not just willy-nilly kill whoever you want and eat them. There are specific, odd as it may be to us, specific moral laws in place that they follow.
Yeah, they have this idea that certain eating people is good and certain eating people is bad, and that's an amazing thought. And you know, as we think about this, and the fact that Abigail has not ever studied this before, like
Mhm.
Xander and I have, and yet by just sitting there thinking about, well, how do we know there's good and bad?
Mhm.
How do we know what's right and wrong? She figured it
She
out
was
on her
able
own.
to come up with the exact answer to the question that we were asking her about, even though she's never
She
studied
didn't know
this
the
before.
specific name, and I
Mhm.
mean, other than a moral law, or
Yeah.
I don't know what you would call it, but that idea that the fact that we say and will argue that a certain thing is good or a certain thing is bad.
Mhm.
I think about this a lot with what's going on in our country right now, and well, all around the world with the coronavirus.
Mhm.
If there is no God, if the Darwin theory of survival of the fittest is true, if evolution is true, then what are we doing?
What we
We're-
should be doing is dropping all restrictions, going out there.
Get everybody sick,
Mhm.
and the weak die, and the strong survive.
And that's evolution.
And that's atheism.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. That's what the view of there's no God says. Many people won't admit to that or won't agree to that. Oh, no, we're more civilized than that. Well, why?
Mhm.
Think about, there's all this talk about the strain on the resources of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Let
We
5%
have
of the
a global
population die
pandemic
off.
right now.
We could reduce the population of the earth by 5%.
Exactly.
Boom, in a few months. Wouldn't that be good? No. as believers in a benevolent, loving God, we know that the strong protect the weak.
And even those who are atheists and don't believe in a benevolent, protecting, loving God, and that the strong should protect the weak, they're still
taking precautions.
I haven't heard anyone. Dad said he heard one person say, "Stick with the standard evolutionary reply."
Let everybody. If they can't build their own immunity to it, they deserve to die.
Mm-hmm.
That's wow. But that is really
It's
what.
because all the evolutionists have family, and if they have weak family members, then they get
One of those people
upset.
that they love might die.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or what if they themselves are the weak one that may die?
Mm.
So their self-preservation kicks in, and they all of a sudden don't want to live by the standard that they claim is how the world should work.
Yep.
And that's a problem. And as Christians, though, we need to obviously live by the standard that we proclaim, which is that God loves us, and yes, there is death in this world, and we'll talk about the reasoning for that and those things later on another lesson, another study. But if there is a good God, like we believe, who loves humanity, then we should be doing what we can to show our love for humanity just like him. And so we care for our neighbor, we care for the person who's sick, we try to help them get better, we try to help them live and survive this disease instead of just throwing them in the pit. And so that's something for us to think about. But this very idea, there's good and there's bad. One of the questions that I've asked when I'm talking to someone who does not believe in a God, I just ask them, why should I not kill you and take everything that belongs to you right now?
Now, what are you thinking right now? Harsh question. Is it? See, if you don't believe in a God, that's not or shouldn't be a harsh question.
Survival of the fittest.
Because if he's strong enough to kill you and take what you have, then according
Why
to
not?
evolution, according to atheism, he is deserving of what he has gained.
I deserve it.
He
because
was
I'm
stronger
bigger and
than
stronger
you,
than
better than you. He had more money, more skill with a gun, a knife, whatever he used. He was better and therefore deserved to survive, deserved to have your resources that you were using to survive. So, under atheism, why is that a harsh question? The very simple answer is because atheism and evolution are not the correct worldview.
Yeah.
And instinctively we know this, and that's why we're like, oh no, that's a bad question. Why is that a bad question?
No, it's a
Because
perfectly good question.
it fits under the atheistic evolutionary worldview, but that's not right.
Upon what standard
Mm-hmm.
do we build that moral code or moral law that we were talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has to build it on something. Well, what's best for society? Well, who gets to decide what's best for society? I mean, in a society where, right now, again, with this pandemic, what would be best for society might be to quit taking sick people to the hospital and straining the resources. Maybe.
Yep.
What's best for society during a drought might be to let some people die of thirst.
More water for everybody
Yeah.
else makes perfect sense.
What's best during a famine might be to kill some people off and eat them.
Not only do you cut down on the food everybody else needs, but then you have more food for everybody else to have. So you kill two birds with one stone right there.
Yeah.
Why don't we do these things?
Yeah, the idea.
They make perfect, cold, logical sense
if there's not a God.
if there's not a
if
God.
there's not a standard of morality that we need to abide by.
But fact of the matter is that, like I said earlier, no matter how skewed and twisted it may get, we all still hold to a moral law. We all still have values and rules, whether they are society dictated or individual, I don't want to use the word preferences, but individual standards that we try
reasons.
to follow that fall under a strong, strict moral law. Of course, that law may be broken at times, but that's kind of the way laws work.
And-
They're broken
right.
from time to time.
Yeah, some people don't live by that law.
Mm-hmm.
They don't live by that moral code. You know, some people seem to have no standard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have murderers, you have rapists, you have cannibals at times. You know, that pop up, and of course they have to be punished for that because they have gone against the moral law. Right, Abigail, any thoughts, questions, comments that you want to throw in here? I know Xander and I have been doing a lot of the talking, and
Yeah.
I just got to say much. So, anything you're thinking, or question, or comment, or anything before we close out?
Well, you were talking about society and stuff.
Mhm.
There's a book series that I read a while back, and it was like in the future where society had taken over everything, and they controlled when you were born, when you died, when you got married, who you got married to. And the society always thought this is what's best for the people, and this is how you get the best out of everything, how to get the strongest offspring, and
Mhm.
how and everything. And then people started fighting back and choosing when they wanted to die and who they wanted to get married to. And sometimes some things that the society does is good for the people, and other times it's not. Like one guy, he was supposed to die when he turned like 70, but he ran off right before he was supposed to die, and he lived for like 15 more years, and he was actually able to save like the whole world from a pandemic basically. So sometimes it's like abortion right now. You could kill, like, maybe somebody already killed a baby that could have figured out the cure to the coronavirus. So, like, all this stuff that the society and other people are doing, it's wrong, but then other things are good. I'm not sure
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
There's always the difficulty of trying to balance the good of each individual within the society and the good of the collective as a whole. And you know, this the kind of the cold logic of like the Vulcans on Star Trek is the good of the many outweighs the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one or of just a few, and so they base everything on that. And it seems logical until you actually have human lives involved, and realizing, well, that one might do something that would save others, and it might wind up being more important to save that one.
And it seems like it's right and like it's the best way that things can be until you're one of the few.
Yeah, until you're the one.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and we look at all sorts of things throughout history where one group has taken power and, you know, just mistreated another group. And that happens because it was best for this group. I mean, it was best for the Nazis in Germany to kill off the Jews. It was best for the slave owners to have slaves to do their work for them. It's best for Mao to kill off the people who were eating too much food and making it not enough for everybody to have enough. You know, it's good. It seems good for that society when they're doing it, but then when we look back on it, we realize oftentimes it wasn't good. When we look at it with a standard of what is right and wrong instead of a standard of, well, the people who did it got a lot out of it, so it was good for them. And so this idea of a moral law, this idea that there is a right and wrong, and there has to be some sort of standard, there has to be something good, there has to be something bad, is a powerful argument that there's got to be some source for that, some standard above us that causes all of us to strive for a moral law.
And we have hit
Yeah,
30 minutes.
You thought the other one was long.
Yeah.
All right. So we didn't even get off talking about religion and
No.
the religions yet in this
The
one.
moral law and the ontological argument are two very... Well, the ontological argument is just kind of complicated,
Deep
and the moral
philosophy.
law is incredibly interesting to consider. So between those two, it makes perfect sense to me that we made over 30 minutes on
Yeah.
this video.
Oh yeah, we didn't even really dig deep into either one of those.
Yeah.
And still hit that 30-minute mark.
Yep.
But hope that this has been beneficial to you, and we're going to dig further. We're going to look at a lot of different things as we go through this, a lot of different issues, and of course we're going to be looking at some of the world religions as well. In some of these, we'll get into some of those, and we're going to try to be fair to what they believe. Obviously, we are not going to be able to go in depth into any of these in a 30-minute video. I mean,
Yes.
many of these religions, people study them for a lifetime, right?
Yes.
So we're in 30 minutes not going to deal with every nuance that there is in all of those different religions.
And we hope that these videos don't scare you away because they're long and deep and philosophical, because you need that.
Yeah.
You need to be able to get those deep thoughts.
We live in a soundbite Twitter society where if you can't say it in 44 characters,
144 sounds right.
then it must not be important.
Yep.
And that's no. Real thought goes much deeper than just a few words in a short quip or short sound bite. And so we need to be willing to actually sit down and think, okay, well, sure, somebody can make a meme that makes Christianity or the Bible or the existence of God look stupid. I can do the same thing with atheism or evolution. But what we really want to do is dig down and examine them more deeply than just a meme or just a quote or just a little smart alecky remark. What really is at the foundation of these different contrasting worldviews? Because that's where we really need to make the decision. What are we building the way we live our life on? What is that foundation, and is it going to stand?
Yep.
Foundations are very important for building something, and so it is with our lives.
And we hope that you will join us for more videos in this series. Do you know which one we're going to be doing next?
No. Fortunately, since we're only putting these out once a week, we're putting these out on Sundays. So you can come back next Sunday and look for another one. But since we're only doing them every Sunday, I'm kind of haven't laid out for sure exactly what's next.
Makes sense.
Kind of like to get into one of the religions.
Yeah.
And I guess we could just go with them in size order.
Since we've covered the four main arguments for God's existence and his character, it makes sense that we'd be doing a religion next.
And I know at some point we do want to deal with some of the problems like pain and suffering, and some other objections to the existence of God.
Yeah.
And we'll have to deal with those things as well.
Yep.
So, but hope you have enjoyed this, and sorry, not sorry that it went so long.
Yeah.
Sorry, not sorry. But I hope that you will share this with others that might find it interesting, and enjoy your week.
Yep.
And don't forget our prayer videos.
Yes.
Check those out as well.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.